Hi folks, this is all the fruit. Today I want to find out how some of the exotic and not so frost hardy fruit collections, stuff like avocados and citruses, survived the last winter in Germany, and how those collections are being developed in the present year. Well, for that I think first we need to establish a baseline, or rather two baselines. First, what is actually possible and doable here in Germany, and second, how was the winter. For the first baseline, I start here, miles away from the collections, in the, well, climatically most favorable area in Heidelberg, I would say, the Philosopher's Path and the slopes around it. You can see you have the river in front, which acts as an air conditioner, cooling in summer and heating in winter. In the back you have all those slopes and houses and walls and the hill with the forest protecting you from the northerly winds. Everywhere where you have this situation, hills or mountains at the northern side, well, in the northern hemisphere of course, a water body on the southern side, and quite a narrow south-facing slope. It doesn't work so well if the mountain is very far away from the water, but if they are close together like this, you get a narrow area of very favorable microclimate. And if you look over there at this little knoll over there, over 30 years ago there was a guy called Dr. Tischer who established maybe the most striking exotic and not frost hardy plant collection over there. Back there before there was really a lot of internet trade, before there was the EU, he had to go to places like Italy and France and Britain. I mean, he was also working in the botanic gardens, so probably he could order from botanic gardens there and establish rare and not frost hardy stuff there 20, 30, 40 years ago. Unfortunately, I never met him. I learned about this place only after he died about 25 years ago. So probably he started more like 45 years ago, I would say, because back then he had been working on this for quite some time. I'm too lazy to climb up there right now. And so just to introduce you to some really microclimatic favorable collections here, I'll check out this little park down there by the river. I'm constantly using this little garden as a climate indicator, and as I said, as a baseline for what's possible, because if you are not working in an inner courtyard somewhere where you have buildings and windows on all sides, this is basically the best microclimate here. The river is very close, the water sucking up a lot of the cold. Well, actually physically it works the other way around. In order to freeze, water releases a lot of heat. Water basically needs to release a lot of heat, so water works as a very good air conditioner. And here in the back we have the wall, the houses and the slope with the forest. So most favorable microclimate you can imagine. I really would like to have a garden here. The only citrus that has been, well, traditionally grown in this part of Germany, we are in the warmest part of Germany, is Poncirus trifoliata or Citrus trifoliata. Citrus relative, which is deciduous, and that's why it can survive quite cold winters. I've seen this growing and fruiting in the best microclimates around here since the 80s. And now, at least in our area, it's not considered anything special anymore, because it can stand up to minus 25 degrees centigrade. In the 90s, a lot of people and botanic gardens started citrus collections with other frost-hardy citruses, but around 2000 we had a couple harsh winters, and back then this fancy basically kind of died out, only to resurface in very recent years. Here we have a huge pomegranate bush, almost 4 meters tall. Like most of those not so frost hardy things. It died back to the ground 10 years ago in the harsh winters around 2013. That's why it grows as a big bush. Probably it was originally intended as a tree. Now, yeah, in good microclimates, they grow quite well. This one has been fruiting regularly every year. Here you can see a couple shriveled up fruits up there. Only in very dry summers, after very dry summers, they get nice and sweet. Usually they are more sour than in the Mediterranean, but yeah, in good microclimates, pomegranate can grow well here. A very typical ornamental in this area is the peach almond, which in almond growing areas is usually being used as a rootstock for almonds because it's so hardy. Here it's used as an ornamental, but what very few people know that even since Roman times in the Middle Ages, the area around here has been a producer and exporter of almonds. So almonds, they go here and they have been possible for thousands of years. Now it's getting interesting. The loquat. This is actually the best location to harvest loquat fruits in late spring because of the microclimate. You can see again here around 2013 they froze down to the ground and resprouted. So here we can start checking for frost damage. Here we can also, well, not just see what's possible around here, but how was the winter. I know this is a very long introduction, but pushing the zone, which is slang for American slang for trying to grow stuff, trying to grow tropical stuff in colder climates, is quite a complicated thing. So I want to give you as much context as possible. So we can see big branch dieback hasn't happened for 10 years, but with this one, other than most of the other plants I showed you, a lot of additional parts are being exposed in winter. The leaves and the young flowers, and actually the fruits start developing in winter and early spring. I cannot see any frost damage on the leaves. However, there are some strange diseases on the leaves which give me a bit of trouble. And well, some flowers died back. Actually, a lot survived, and we're gonna have quite a good medlar harvest, where in previous years sometimes the fruits died back in spring. This can happen again. Some of those fruits don't look too healthy, but basically the stuff flowered in autumn. The flowers survived, and the little fruits, which are very tender, survived the winter. So the winter cannot have been extremely cold, and traditionally you couldn't have grown this thing here anyways. In traditionally very cold winters like in the 2000s and 2010s, it would have frozen back, and only in the last couple years it fruits quite regularly. And the fact that most of the fruits look well tells me that this winter was not extremely cold. Well, when we look around right now in late March, it's very dry. It didn't rain a lot in the 1 week since I was here, and I was told that just before I arrived around the 20th of March, it was actually summer weather, 25 degrees. This is actually quite normal to have a drought period here in March and April. It's a little bit of a problem if you want to plant fruits or vegetables in an area where you don't have a lot of water for watering, because as you can see, the ground, the soil is completely dried out. Not to a big, well, why am I a farmer with farming tools, basically? Okay, as you can see, only the surface is really dried up, but it's not a moist spring soil. And let's check out, well, the stuff has developed quite early. However, everything is really small because it seems like there has been quite a lot of drought for at least a couple weeks. Here another loquat tree. This grows taller but always produces less fruits than the other. You can see only single fruits. I think this is still alive, but Let's see if it will produce something. Most of the inflorescences are dead. However, this could also be due to some diseases, but it could also be due to frosts in early winter. There are a couple more Mediterranean things like Vitex agnus castus and strawberry trees in this garden, and nice rosemary shrubs. But you get the idea, basically what is kind of more or less established, at least in the best microclimates. Those things are grown throughout the city, but they don't fruit quite well in normal climate. However, here in the most favorable microclimates, you can actually grow them as normal fruit trees for production. And yes, we are still at a super long introduction. Let's look around here. In this area, the grass or herbs haven't been cut since last year. So what can we see? Dactylis glomerata is already ready to flower. This has not developed just during the last couple weeks. It didn't freeze back in winter. This grass develops very vigorously in winter as long as it's mild and moist enough. And even if it freezes back, it just starts developing again. I think it's still a net win for it. If it freezes back every couple weeks, it can still photosynthesize a lot to get a net gain during the winter. And here in March we already have quite short and not too numerous, but actually several and even taller flower stalks. That's a sign for quite a mild winter. I'm looking for a nightshade, for a black nightshade or its relatives. A couple years ago, about 5 years ago, we had 2 winters which were so mild that the black nightshade survived in urban areas and even flowered, and the fruits ripened during winter. So in spring you could just harvest quite huge amounts. However, the only nightshade I see here is the rare yellow nightshade. It is not as frost hardy as the red nightshade. Also, I'm pretty sure those fruits, well, they could have developed during the winter. Tastes a bit fermented, but still kind of okay. Well, here we can see it froze back to the ground, but the root survived, and the root is producing new shoots now. So this shows me that the winter was mild, but not extremely mild. In extremely mild winters, I've seen even above ground parts of the yellow nightshade surviving. And as I said, with the black nightshade, even leaves, flowers and fruits survive. But the black nightshade is a little bit more frozen. There is a black nightshade over there. Very important climate indicators for me. Here is another one. But it seems it froze back at least to the ground. Maybe the subterranean parts of those two survived, maybe not. The ground is too hard to pull them out and they haven't started developing yet. Okay, but the above ground parts, even of the black nightshade, did not survive. That means the winter was not really mild. But let's ask the rare fruit and rare plant collectors themselves. Klaus and Rosie have been collecting rare and often not so frost hardy plants for decades, and having bees and flowers and fruits and so on. And whenever I want to know something about growing rare and sensitive plants around here, I come to visit them. Yeah, this little laurel tree, 20 years ago it wouldn't have survived out here. And right now they are cutting down quite a large part of their garden to replace it with a citrus orchard. So, jetzt filme ich dich. Nee, mir geht's darum, wie der Winter war.
Der Winter war nicht sehr kalt mit den Temperaturen, aber lang.
Und
so um die 8, 9 Grad maximal.
Also minus 8, 9 Grad.
Genau.
So Klaus says the coldest temperatures were -8, 9 degrees. Und gab es auch so über ein paar Tage oder Wochen Dauerfrost?
Ja, aber ich glaube, mehr wie 5 waren es nicht.
Also 5 Tage Tag und Nacht Dauerfrost sozusagen. Okay, das ist ja schon mal kein...
Bananen sind reingegangen.
So he says maybe around 5 days where there was frost day and night, but he points out his bananas. I mean, just a week or two ago they look completely dead, but he said, firstly inside they are still hard, and also you can see the new leaves are coming out. That means the whole inside has survived, and unlike last year, where the winter was cold and the spring was late, unlike last year, this year we have a chance of flowers and maybe even fruits. So this part looks a lot like a standard German garden. Cherry trees, apple trees, plums, pears, apricots, peaches and all hybrids. Well, around here the huckleberries or the blueberries have to be grown in pots because the soil is too alkaline. However, they decided they don't want so many of those things anymore. And they're gonna get rid of a bunch of their traditional fruit trees, replacing them with stuff like pawpaws. The two small things here are pawpaws, but they are very frost hardy. And more important, with citruses. Those have been in the ground since last year. Was war das hier nochmal? Satsuma. So this is basically a mandarin-like fruit.
Nein, Satsuma ist hier oben.
Ah, okay. So this is the Satsuma, basically a mandarin-like fruit, but much more frost hardy. As you can see, only a couple of the leaves have gotten frost damage. War das komplett eingepackt den ganzen Winter? Gar nicht. Also stand der so frei?
Nur unten der Fuß.
Ah,
Nur der Fuß war mit dem Zeug hier eingepackt. Hier ist die Veredelungsstelle. Und die Veredelungsstelle kann die Minustemperatur nicht halten, aber die hält -10 Grad.
Ah, okay. So they only had those shredded branches here. The upper part can survive -10 degrees. The lower part cannot. Here is the grafting spot. So they protected only the base. Yeah, he was not so happy that they were grafted on something not that frost hardy. But apparently, up here, das stand da so einfach so in der Landschaft rum. Wow, so everything, only the base was covered, probably 5-6 centimeters thick. And this Satsuma, Mandarin-like citrus survived. Und was war das nochmal? Jutsu. Das heißt, Jutsu, das war sowas Zitronenartiges.
Eine Zitrone, aber die Form der Zitrone ist von einer Mandarine. Also es ist eine Kreuzung von irgendwas. Aber es ist eine Zitrone, aber die Form, also es ist nicht länglich, sondern die hat die Form von einer Mandarine.
So a lemon with the shape of a mandarin. As you can see, very spiny. Wie habt ihr die geschützt?
Gar nichts.
Gar nicht, auch nicht?
Nichts, gar nichts.
Okay, here they didn't do any frost protection. And this thing survived. I cannot see any frost damage.
Der hat gar nichts.
Der hat gar nichts. Der hat's komplett, wow, nicht schlecht. And here a couple more of the trees are gonna, they have to go. And the plan is to replace them with more citruses. Now my plan is to harvest tree sap from the trees which are supposed to go. But they don't have a lot. Also die Aprikose hat an einer Stelle was Großes, bei der Pflaume sehe ich aber nichts. Ah.
Aber die Aprikose hat mal...
Here is the little greenhouse where Klaus has been preserving his numerous plants for decades.
Hier nichts anrichten kann. Ne?
So those things are gonna be planted soon. They are grafted pretty high and they are grafted on Poncirus. Poncirus trifoliata can survive up to minus 25 degrees centigrade. And so you don't need to protect the base at all anymore, while the graft, the upper part, is elevated, so it will not get as much frost, but I'm afraid sometimes it will get a lot more cold winds. Yeah, they have a lot of crazy stuff. I think this is cryptomeria, a lot of different palms. Wonderful stuff in this tiny greenhouse. Carob. Was habt ihr so viele Kiefern hier? Brauchen die das Gewächshaus?
Das ist also die Pinus pinus, also
Ach, Pinus pinea ist das?
Ja, genau.
Ah, so that's the domestic Mediterranean pine. Last year I had the first big harvest here in Germany.
Die sind in Töpfen, deswegen sehen die auch so mickrig aus. Und ich habe oben im Garten eine ausgepflanzt. Die ist aber dann leider ausgerechnet auf einer Stelle ausgepflanzt worden, wo ich nicht dran gedacht habe, dass eine Treppe früher war. Deswegen hat die jetzt den Wurzelbereich nicht so richtig erfassen können. So, aber die ist trotzdem wesentlich größer geworden.
And there in the background there is a palm which was planted inside this greenhouse permanently. Inside Doro's giant 10,000 square feet or 1,000 square meters greenhouse, this is where the magic happens. And this is where I want to, well, this is where we are slowly amazing huge subtropical fruit and veg collection. It's not a heated greenhouse anymore. Apparently the gas boiler broke down and they decided to never repair it. I told them there is still the old way. See, there is a chimney here and another chimney there. They think there is another chimney in the other part and also one here, and this is even working. A couple kiwis. You don't need to plant them indoors. They can grow quite well outdoors. This one has even been used from time to time because this area is being used for gatherings. But I told them, you can also perfectly well just heat your greenhouse the old way with those chimneys. Well, here a veteran of the old nursery before Doro took it over. A big citrus tree in this pot, which unfortunately finally has succumbed. Let's see what we have in those greenhouses. We have a lot of things, but right now I'll concentrate only on the least frost hardy. Doro likes to eat, okay, well, the boiler might be dead, but the mechanics of the greenhouse are still working, so for ventilation. So Doro likes, like all the hipsters and Gen Z, whatever, to eat avocados. And then she has a couple of avocado seedlings like this here. And during the cold nights, they put plastic over them, and also they burnt those candles around them. However, this one probably froze down to the ground, but I'm sure the roots are still intact. Basically, we think even if they freeze back every year, the root system gets bigger and stronger every year. And so they will, after a couple years when it gets even more mild, it will, they will finally grow to a sufficient size to produce fruits or maybe to be grafted with better varieties. I kind of persuaded her to buy this avocado, which is supposed to be a Mexicola avocado. Here is the sign. It was quite expensive, but as you can see, it's about 1.80 meters, about 6 feet tall. They also protected it a lot with plastic bags during those cold nights and stuff. And, well, the leaves have certainly died. Everything up to here. So that's, over 1 meter or 4 feet. And even the bases of the lateral branches seem to have survived. And it might start growing again soon. let's hope for it, because it was expensive, and this is actually, well, I heard about an even more frost-hardy variety, the Del Rio or something like this. But after this expensive thing froze back like this, I have to persuade Doro a lot before she gets a new one. Well, here she has made a whole cactus collection. I told her frost is not a problem for those things, as long as you keep them dry in winter. All the cacti will survive, Cylindropuntia and Platopuntia. I'm not sure whether the agave will survive, but I'm kind of confident. Well, here, this is probably some more tropical cactus which died. And of course, the aloes here. I have planted 2 aloes. No, those cannot make it around here. Also, I'm not sure about this little cactus here. And the Opuntia ficus indica, it's a little bit difficult, but if you keep them dry enough in autumn, I'm sure they'll survive. Here another Feijoa indoors, looking much better, but as I said, nowadays they even survive outdoors in Heidelberg. Here I got her, Musa zikimensis, the frost hardiest banana which produces kind of edible fruits. Basio is more frost hardy, but doesn't produce edible fruits. And while the leaves froze back, look at that, the base still looks good. I'm very confident that this is gonna grow, that this is gonna survive, and then in a couple of years this is gonna give us fruits. Maybe not the best quality bananas, but edible bananas. Well, we made the passion fruit collection here last year, and to be honest, they looked pretty bad even last year. And now they all seem to have frozen, at least down to the ground. We took some which, well, we asked a passion flower specialist, and he gave us some which are probably a little bit too sensitive for outdoors, but should be able to survive here in the greenhouse. However, above ground nothing has survived, but look at that. This space looks the lowest couple centimeters like it might still be alive. Not sure, but it might still be alive. Passiflora actinia. Oh yeah, look at that. The lowest part, 20-30 centimeters, has survived. Everything up there has died back, but the plant is still alive. This Diamantina also is already starting to resprout from the base. The most interesting for me was Ligularis. What? Max? I don't remember a Passiflora Max. I remember we had the Passiflora was it Ligularis? No, Passiflora. The banana passion flower. But I'm not sure where it is. Here is a Physalis, and unfortunately yesterday Doro ripped it out. But we noticed that while the above ground parts have died back, the root has survived. You might ask, why is it so important to survive Physalis roots? You can grow them each year from seeds. Yeah, but if you already have a well-developed root system, they will develop much earlier, produce a lot more fruits, and you'll have a lot more to eat. There is actually a neighbor of Doro who has a whole, well, not a whole greenhouse, but a lot of Physalis plants, which he protects. He protects the roots over the winter. And so every spring, those big, strong root systems are producing new plants, which give him a lot of tasty fruits. And I would really like to get Doro a nice big Physalis collection of rare Physalises, but she doesn't like Physalis. Here a very interesting thing. There is a pomegranate, which apparently didn't shed all its leaves. That happens a lot with young trees or young branches. They basically take the risk to leave the leaves over winter so that they can photosynthesize because they are still young and need it. They died, but apparently the stems survived basically all the way up to the tips, and it's resprouting now, and of course it's resprouting much earlier than the one outdoors, because here in this greenhouse, as soon as the sun shines down on it, it is totally heating up a lot. Today is a very cloudy day, but on a sunny day, even around 0 degrees or negative degrees centigrade outdoors, it's going to be really hot here. And here a couple shrubs, salvia, thyme, this should be some cistus. Those are all Mediterranean shrubs which wouldn't have survived outdoors like this in previous decades. Now they have even quite a good chance outdoors. Another thing that gives me hope is that this Cyperus here has survived. It's not papyrus, it's a different species, but also not a very frost hardy one. But here in the greenhouse, it has survived the winter, even in this exposed pot. Oh, and look at that, this has survived even better. This has survived so well. Those two that well, they look like they've been here for months. Wow. Yes, they must have been here for months, and they survived the winter. So this is quite an achievement. Wow. In elevated pots, that means more exposed than if they were in the ground. And very little frost damage. Very little frost damage for such sensitive plants. Ruta, another Mediterranean plant, has also survived nicely, but it's a Mediterranean plant, but it is kind of frost hardy-ish, so this is not such a big miracle. Yeah, the laurel and the olive trees in here. Of course, I expected them to survive. Here another seedling avocado. Died back to the ground, but look, the base is still alive. So each year the root systems will get bigger and stronger. And then one day when it's mild enough that the above ground parts can survive, they'll have years of a head start before all other avocados in the area. A little loquat, of course, if they survive outdoors, it's also going to survive indoors. And this Musa Basio, but I'm also quite confident it will come back. And here I persuaded Doro to get 3 Trachycarpus fortunei, or Mexican fan palms. I see only 2 here, but they have apparently made it through the winter. Those are very popular ornamentals in subtropical areas, but those are also the first palm cabbage I've ever tried, and it was a very big and very tasty palm cabbage. So I persuaded her to plant them here, and after a couple years, when they are tall enough that she has to cut them down, she can have the tasty palm cabbage. Of course, they need a lot of water and fertilizer. Not now. We are still waiting for the April frosts and maybe even the May frosts before we start watering those not so frost hardy things profusely, because yeah, everything can still go the wrong way this time of the year. In April and May and even in June we have a couple pretty nasty, well, in April, what is the cold in April called? I know sometimes in the 90s, in February and early March, we had summer weather and everything was developing. And then in late March and April, the ground was frozen solid, 1 foot down or so. And then in May, we have the so-called Ice Heiligen, the ice saints, a period where you also kill a lot of crops. And then in June, there is the so-called Schafskälte, or sheep cold. After you already share your sheep, they die from a specific cold period in June. And if it's cold enough to kill sheep, it's also cold enough to kill some of those sensitive plants. But let's see what we are planning to plant this year. We got a lot of the plants already last year. This is a heated house. And so let's see what we have here. I think this is a pitanga I bought for Doro. Those looks like silver berries and rosemary. And what is this? Gemüsebaum. Here some geranium. And here, what is this? Wild apricot. Well, no, apart from this little pitanga, those are not really the interesting things I was looking for. Oh, hidden in a different part. A lot of unrecognizable things. Oh, this opancha, I wonder if it produced its fruits here or if it was brought like this from the Mediterranean. Here is a little passion fruit, maracuja, that's doing quite well. There is a third one somewhere in the greenhouse which also froze down to the ground, but I hope it survived underground. So the maracuja is doing quite well. A carob which is doing quite well. A lemongrass. I think this is some eugenia here. What does it say? Is it Krumichama or something like this? I think I got this too. Well, I think it's a eugenia and I got it too. Here is a dwarf pomegranate with still 2 fruits attached. This looks like another pomegranate and 2 citruses in the background. And here's something without the label as far as I can see, which apparently didn't make the cut. Also this citrus, yeah, the graft already died last year. We are keeping it for the rootstock. But the rootstock is not looking very healthy either. Well, I guess that's not that much. I have to persuade her to let me buy her a couple more things. And yeah, Doro told me where all the stuff is which I couldn't find. It's in the bathroom. A lot of cacti, Opancha ficus indica and Opancha dileniae, a couple chili trees, a wasabi, some taro, citrus verbena, here a little tea tree I bought for her. Waren die Teeblätter jetzt gut fermentiert?
Müssen wir einen Tee machen. Dann machen wir
She said now that a lot of it is rotten, it's probably so fermented that she can make a tea. And last, but of course not least, the different citruses. Here quite a big one, a medium-sized one, and a tiny one. A lot of stuff to plant into the greenhouse. And there are tons of little pots with stuff where I'm not sure what it is. But she clearly forbade me to buy her any more trees, but who cares what other people say? Of course I'm gonna buy a ton more. Here are a couple things which spent the winter in my basement and were brought here only recently. A Physalis, where the stem seems to have survived. A Musa, oh, which banana is this? Ooh. Himalaya. I think this is a different Himalaya banana. It's not like the Musa zikimensis, but a cultivated hybrid, which is supposed to be very frost hardy and give good fruits. Oh, this banana doesn't look very good. What is it? Lotus banana. Did I buy them or did I get them from some collector? And here's something which seems to have survived. And here I think this was yacon and some other things which mostly don't look so healthy. There are a couple more in my basement. But all in all, that's not enough. I think I'll have to buy a couple more and force Doro to plant them in her greenhouse. Well, we still have a couple weeks before maybe for the best time to buy them. So start giving me ideas. You already gave me tons of ideas last year, but give me more ideas. What should we plant in the greenhouse? What could survive such a winter, 2 weeks of frost and night frost under -8 degrees when it is in such a greenhouse. In a big pot in front of the greenhouse, Doro has planted a maracuja. Another maracuja is in the greenhouse, but this one, I told her, maybe better bring the pot inside and protect it and everything, but she decided to keep it outside. Like this is
like 100 kilos.
100 kilos. You have here 50 strong men. Well, this is the passion fruit you usually get in the supermarkets. You know, those purple and yellow ones. That's why I am extremely interested, even in the smallest chance that it survived here. By the way, Doro, how cold do you think was the winter? How cold was the coldest night?
-8.
-8. And you said the nights were cold, but you didn't have a period of several weeks where it was frost then.
2 weeks, maybe.
But was it, did you have frost also during the day? Or?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
so day and night for 2 weeks. Okay, that's bad. That's bad. So here is the maracuja. I don't know, man. Here at the base, the color is different.
Yes, true.
See, the lowest 5 centimeters. I mean, there is a fissure here, probably from frozen and exploded sap. Actually, several fissures. No, it doesn't look good. But still, the color is different, so there is a minuscule chance that something, maybe at least the roots have survived. Everything further up, of course, is dead, but starting from here, the last couple centimeters, there is some greenery that could be rotten, moist stuff, but there is also a minimal chance that something has survived. Well, some of the ceramic pots have gotten some damage. You protected this because of the pots, not because of the plants, right?
Yeah, true.
But it wasn't enough. Yeah, also Doro said in the areas where there was shade all day, there was visible frost all day. So basically -8 at night and around 0 during the day. Minus something without sun, plus something with sun. Outside the greenhouse are a couple things which you might not expect in Germany. A European dwarf palm. This is the northernmost palm in the world. The northernmost wild growing palm in the world. The northernmost wild populations are in southern France, as at the same geographical latitude as southern Canada. It's pretty frost hardy and it produces date-like fruits of inferior quality. The feijoa seems to have gotten some damage. I don't know if this is just due to the frost or maybe also sun damage, because if you have frost and sun at the same time, the plants get drought damage, because if the soil is frozen and the leaves get a lot of sunshine, the leaves start to photosynthesize, but the roots cannot extract anything from the frozen soil. So pretty interesting. Doro, was it very dry and sunny when it was cold? Yes. Also dry, the soil was dry. Because this looks like frost damage from the winter sun. You know, when the leaves get hot and the leaves photosynthesize, but the roots cannot pump up any more water. And this is basically drought damage that happens because of the frost. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, I would say so too.
Yeah, so
Was machen wir mit der Pflanze jetzt?
Die lassen wir, der geht's gut. Da sind ein paar von den Blättern leicht zurückgefroren. She asked what to do with the plant. The plant is fine, just a couple of the leaves have frozen a little bit. Water it a lot, fertilize it a lot, and you can harvest a lot of nice pineapple guavas. The big rosemary bush has survived very well, even though it's very exposed here in this elevated pot. So basically all this can freeze. Also, this looks like Eternit. Do you think? Oh yeah, nice poisonous pot. Well, I remember when rosemary wouldn't survive outside in Germany in most winters. Basically, you had them in pots and you had to bring them inside because even the roots would die. And now it grows in such an exposed location. I mean, again, outside of town, basically surrounded by very few buildings. Also elevated half a meter or about 2 feet. And still, it's been growing like this without freezing back for like at least 10 years. The Himalaya palm was planted only in autumn, and it also looks like it has a little bit of drought damage. But apart from that, I think it will establish quite well and grow quite well here. We have Himalaya palms which have been growing in the ground for 20, maybe even 30 years around here. And well, the yuccas have been also growing outside for decades. The little laurel tree over there, or laurel shrub, wouldn't have survived here in earlier times. I remember around 2000 there was one single laurel shrub in front of a private house in Heidelberg, and sometimes I would go there at night and steal a couple little leaves, but this was inside the built-up area. Out here in the field 20-30 years ago, especially 30 years ago, no chance for this thing to survive. Oh, and in the background there is a fig shrub. Again, you can see it froze back like 10 years ago, although this looks like it has been cut back maybe more like 5-6 years ago. But figs nowadays are quite normal everyday fruit trees around here. The winter frost in the last 10 years has not been the main problem, but the summer rains and the pests, and also a very peculiar problem because they used to freeze back every couple years historically for decades. People would plant them in small and sheltered corners where they nowadays grow to sizes which are not really intended for those specific locations. Also, this one was probably planted inside this greenhouse, which has not been used as a greenhouse for years. Well, Doro pointed also out that the pineapple sagebrush, the pineapple salvia, is very frost sensitive, much more so than the normal Mediterranean one. But even that survived at the base and is coming back. And the very last thing Doro pointed out to me is actually by far the most amazing. Look at this maracuja here. This is the supermarket passion fruit. And she said she didn't do anything to protect this one. So this has just been growing here. Well, she said everything was pretty much overgrown. That helps a lot. But look at this. Pretty much almost all of the stem has survived except for the uppermost part, which was probably not mature enough. It was still too watery. But look, even the leaves are dead, but even the tendrils have survived. So if this thing survived like this, then I think there is quite a good chance for the cultivation of a lot of different passion fruits around here. Apart from that, stay tuned for a lot more fruit videos from the beautiful and incredibly fruit-rich Well, fruit collections of Doro, as well as Klaus and Rosie, and of course the incredibly fruit-rich city of Heidelberg. And of course, don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe.